Yes, madam, welcome. Shall we start, ma'am?
Yes, sir, we can start. We are good to start?
Yeah. So let me
Yes.
introduce you first.
Yes.
So I welcome Advocate Rashmi D. Dhongde on behalf of New Law College Ahmednagar and Ahmednagar Jilla Maratha Vidya Prasarak Samaj for this internship program 2021-22 that is introduced to make student aware about what practical difficulties are there in actual code. So we had already conducted a number of lectures of different resources person practicing in the code because there is a gap between academic and actual practice. To minimize that gap, we had started this lecture series. So our today's resource person, Advocate Rashmi D. Dhongde, I would like to introduce her in a brief. She is a research scholar at the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics and doing PhD in artificial intelligence and its economics, legal analysis and impact. She done her graduation in economics. She also done a master in law from Department of Law, University of Pune, and her LLB from ILS Law College. She is a practicing lawyer in different law firms she already practiced. She is also an arbitration lawyer. She also visiting faculty in DES Law College, Pune, MIT School of Law, then Bharati Vidyapit, Pune New Law College, and as well Marathwada Mitra Mandras Law College, Pune also. So she worked with the different law firm. There is a long list, but due to paucity of time, we are not going to deal with all the details. But today, we will definitely get the benefit of her vast experience in actual litigation. So, with this, I stopped her introduction and request her to guide our student on the importance of drafting law in civil proceeding. Yes, ma'am, up to you now.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Without wasting time, I think we should start. Dear students, a very good morning to all of you. And the topic that has been assigned to me is drafting in civil cases. Okay. So I hope I'm quite audible to all of you all. If my voice if I'm not audible, if my voice is tearing, then please let me know accordingly so that I can adjust the mic. Okay. Now, dear students, I assume and I validly presume that you are well aware of certain substantive laws that are taught to you during the course of your law school. Certain laws are a must to be known when you start practicing or you intend to practice law. Okay, and that is true for any aspect of law that is, you think your vocation is. You may want to be a litigator, you may want to be working in a law firm, you may want to teach. So there are certain basic laws which you need to know, certain laws that you need to have a proper hang of. Of them, the most essential procedural law is CPC, no doubt, and the substantive law that you are required to know is your Evidence Act. You need to know your Specific Relief Act. You need to know your Limitation Act. And these are some acts without which, civil proceedings are not going to help you at all. These acts all go hand in hand. Okay. The topic today is actually very vast, if you ask me, because right from filing a plaint suit in the court of law up to filing a curative petition in the Supreme Court of India, this entire topic, would encompass everything that, falls under the domain of drafting in civil cases. Okay. So the objective of today's lecture, as I see, is to provide knowledge to all the students regarding drafting, documentation, and advocacy techniques. Okay, and there are various principles that are involved when you sit down to draft. To name a few, you have to know what is drafting, you have to know what is pleading, what is the object of pleading, what are the fundamental rules of pleading given in order 6 of CPC, what are the various provisions given in order 7 of CPC. Okay, you need to know the general principles of drafting, what is drafting, what are the nuances of drafting, what itself constitutes drafting. Merely taking down a format from Google, is it going to suffice your purpose? It is not going to suffice your purpose at all, because no two cases are same. Okay, it may only give you a format, but at the end of the day, it is your expertise that is required when it comes down to drafting in civil cases. There are no technicalities involved when it comes down to drafting in civil cases. When it's a criminal matter, yes, you can say that there is not much of drafting involved as it is involved in civil cases. Okay. Yes, am I audible? Someone posted a message.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Can any?
Yes, ma'am, you are
Yes,
audible. He might have been a problem, he's individual.
yes,
You
yes.
are audible to
So,
all.
yes. So, drafting will involve a lot many things as such. Okay. So, to start with, let us say you have to draft, you have to, civil litigation basically starts not with filing of a plaint in the court of law as such, but the first thing that it starts with is, understanding what is the scope of your work involved. Okay. When a client comes to meet you, your client is, say for example, let us take a set of facts. Your client comes to your office and says, ki, we want to file a suit because our neighbor is infringing our rights, our civil rights. Our neighbor is, trespassing on our property. Now with this set of facts, is this set of facts the only set of facts that you would, know, or that you would have to know if you have to file a civil suit? Will you immediately go to the court of law and file a civil suit? Will you issue a notice, wait for a reply, then go to the court of law and then file a suit? Now if you have to file a suit, which court you have to go? What is the jurisdiction of the court? What is the cause of action? Whether it is in limitation, what relief will you claim? What sections of specific relief act are you going to apply? So on and so forth. So it will involve a plethora of things at the same time. Okay. Suppose a person comes up to your doorstep, to your office, and tells you that yes, my father had a brother. Now this brother is not known for the last more than 10 years. We did not bother, but today we are facing difficulties because his name is still there on the property card record, and now this person is not known. My father is looking after the entire expenditure. He's paying the taxes, he's paying the electricity bills, and his name is there on the property card record. But madam, we now need to, remove his name and only see to it that my father's name is there on the property card extract. So now with this set of facts, what do you think you can do in the court? Can you file a suit? Can you file an application? Or can you just go to the authority and tell that authority, it can be any authority. Can you go and tell them that, yes, now we want to remove this person's name? So that authority is going to ask you, okay, fine. We have no problem. Show us the death certificate. So you don't have a death certificate because the issue is that you don't even know whether that person is alive or dead. Okay. So with this set of facts, what is to be done? So civil a civil suit, its nature can be anything. It is so vast that you are well aware of section 9 of CPC, courts to try all civil suits unless barred. So this is the scope of CPC. Okay. So all that, a lawyer requires, a novice lawyer requires. Now after 18 years in actual practice, right from civil courts up to, I have been to the National Green Tribunal. I have been to the DRT, the Cooperative Court, or High Court, or even the Supreme Court. After, going through this entire hierarchy myself, arguing cases myself, there are a few things which I would like to, definitely share with you all. Okay. All that I have come to arrive at a conclusion is that every lawyer needs three things to be, you know, to have that satisfaction at the end of the day that yes, I'm a lawyer. Okay. Because success is something which definitely is to be counted in terms of money, but success is also, having a good night's sleep. Now, how can you assure that? By doing three things. What are those three things? Hard work, hard work, and hard work. There is no substitute to hard work for a lawyer. Absolutely no substitute. Every lawyer, when he's engaged with a case, he needs three things: chronology, candor, and clarity. Okay. What is chronology? Chronology is a natural way of telling the story by stringing the events on the beads of time. You cannot, when you're drafting, be it a notice or be it an application or be it a suit, you cannot write the defendant has died in the year 2010. Full stop. In the second paragraph, you cannot say the plaintiff's father in the year 2001 had stated that, had prepared a agreement to sell. You cannot go up and down. There has to be a particular chronology to the events that you are narrating in your notice, in your written statement, in your application, in your plaint. Okay. The next essential thing that you ought to know is candor. Candour. Candor. Candor means knowing the good and the bad points, aspects of your client's story, which he is telling you. Okay. You are definitely governed by the Advocates Act. The Advocates Act is going to be there to guide you throughout your career as a lawyer. You have to be well aware that there are certain limitations on the exercise of, as a lawyer. So kindly remember the provisions of the Advocates Act from time to time also. If you're engaging, in a matter, you are having a client with you, you have to maintain that professional relationship with him, but at the same time let him know what the loopholes in his case are, and because he has now engaged you, you will cover up these loopholes. But yes, definitely, if there is something which, even you cannot help, then the you should, inform your client at the beginning itself, because your client is going to have sky high expectations from you. But remember, even you have limitations. The law also has limitations somewhere. If a suit is beyond the period of limitation, you cannot help your client, because there is no provision of filing a delay condonation application under Section 5 of the Limitation Act to bring a suit within limitation. Okay? Because Section 5 of the Limitation Act does not apply to a suit. Section 5 of the Limitation Act only applies to an appeal or an application. So if a client comes up to your doorstep and tells you that, see, I had, given money to Mr. XYZ in the year 2001. Now I want to recover it. I have been asking him for money, but he's not returning it. Now his claim is as it is time barred. Okay. He has sent several notices and that person is not, returning the money. Now the amount is, say for example, 1,000 rupees for the purpose of an illustration. The Limitation Act tells you that the period for limitation for recovery of amount is 3 years. Okay. So if this claim is itself time barred, how can you help your client to recover this money? Okay. So that is why kindly note that there is a certain limit to bring a particular aspect within limitation also. So you should have candor. And the next is you should have clarity. Having clarity about the facts of your client's case is the most important aspect of being a lawyer. If you don't have clarity, you wouldn't be able to draft and you wouldn't be able to, present it even before the court. And if you are a practicing advocate who is going to appear even in the appellate court or even in the high court, even in the Supreme Court, then you are supposed to have clarity of those facts right on day one. Okay, so that you will be able to present this case right up to the Supreme Court of India also. Okay, so now with this, if you kindly, if you all have handy access to the Code of Civil Procedure, yes. Kindly note that you have to see section 9 of CPC. Section 9 of CPC, as I just mentioned a short while ago, is courts to try all civil suits unless barred. Okay, so this itself, shows you all that the civil courts have jurisdiction to try all suits of a civil nature, excepting suits of which their jurisdiction is barred either expressly or by implication. This itself means that there is a variety of cases and the sky is the limit as far as civil cases are concerned. Okay, now every civil suit is going to deal with property. Mostly 99% of suits are going to be dealing with property. Property could be tangible, property could be intangible. Okay, the very mention in section 9 of CPC, if you see, is that even idle in the eyes of law is property. Okay, even an idol in the eyes of law is property. That is why the dispute over the right of idol is also, to be decided by a civil court. So this is the expanse and this is the limit of civil procedure code. This is how civil suits, this is the nature of how civil suits are to be, filed in the courts of law. Further, there could be various suits like suits for the scheme and administration of public or private religious trusts, suits for damages, suits for breach of contract, suits for injunction, suits for specific performance, suits, where there is an infringement of a copyright, or even, a suit for declaration of civil death. Now, if as I just said a short while ago, if there is a suit for declaration of a civil death, then what is the provision, what is the act that you need to pull out? Many a times it happens, that novice lawyers do not know as to where to find the provision. Locating the law is also very essential. Say, for example, I tell you that yes, we need to draft a leave and license agreement. Kindly go and bring out the Bare Act where I can find the provision. Which Bare Act would you bring? Will you bring the Transfer of Property Act? Will you bring the Contract Act? No. The provision for leave and license would be found in the Indian Easements Act. Okay, so locating the law is also very essential and very important. You should know where to find that law. Similarly, if a client tells you that yes, I want to file, I need to know what should I do to bring a civil declaration of death. So, will you tell your client that I'll meet you next time or in the next week? Till that time, I'll find it. That client is not going to come to you again. Okay. So this is the expanse of how civil proceedings, what is the nature of civil proceedings. To tell you that this aspect of civil declaration, you can find the provision in section 108 of the Indian Evidence Act. Okay, that if a person is not known for a consecutive period of 7 years or more, then you can go to the court of law and file a civil suit and get a declaration in terms of section 34 of the Specific Relief Act that that person be declared as not known and civil death may kindly be declared as far as that person is concerned. In such a type of a suit, who is going to be added as a party defendant? What do you think? Who would be added as a party defendant? It is a suit. Okay. So there has to be someone, on the other side. Who could be that other person? That other person has to be the state of Maharashtra through police station Kothurud, police station Nagar, full stop. Why? Because when that person was not known, okay, when that person left his house or he was not known, it was expected, it is normally expected that you go and lodge an missing complaint Okay, you go and inform the police that such and such person has not returned home. He is not found. So please go and try to find out where he is, whether he is alive or dead. So it is obviously the local police station where you lodged the FIR for that person when he went missing after 24 hours that you go and join as a party. So when you file a civil suit for declaration of civil death, you, the next friend or the relative of that person, has to file that suit against the state of Maharashtra through police station Kothur. Okay, so the public prosecutor is going to appear in that matter and file his reply. He is going to inform the court that yes, FIR was filed. You also have a copy of that FIR. You also have to file it in the court. So the court will hear your case. The court will issue a public notice, and the court will wait for 1 month and then give you a declaration that yes, this person is not known. We issued a public notice, but still no one has turned out. So that is why that person will be declared as dead. Okay, so this is how you have to proceed with such kind of suits. But the anxiety of novice lawyers is that all these things are not written anywhere in one book. Okay, there is no such book which has yet come in publication wherein you'll open the book and say, okay, civil suit for declaration, this is to be done, this is to be drafted, this is to be the book, this is the case law. There is no ready referencer available for any one of us, and it is not even expected because no two civil suits are similar. They are not the same. So then it becomes a very uphill task for novice lawyers as to how to sit and draft, what to draft, how to draft. Let us forget about the hard work. Let us go to Google, download a form, and start drafting. And then it becomes a very difficult task for your client because he is going to be the ultimate sufferer, because he will not know what you have drafted, because you will not know what you have drafted. Because when you take instructions from your client, when you sit down, you burn the midnight oil and you draft your own plaint, or you draft your written statement, you draft your appeal, you draft your application, then you remember that case all your life. Okay, this is the beauty of drafting. And drafting does not require any scientific knowledge. It just requires knowledge of the facts of the case. Your client is the person who is well within, he has those knowledge, he has those facts with him. Now it is your task to bring out those facts from him. That is what client counseling sessions are for. How well can you counsel your client and bring out the facts that you are required for your suit is your skill. Okay, you can be guided efficiently by your law school, but at the end of the day, that skill has to be inherent within you too. How to make a person speak to you and give you relevant information, and accordingly how to ask him to bring those documents to you. Because clients tend to tell you things which are not relevant to the case, but it is for you to cut him short and tell him that this is the case that you want me to file. Tell me about this only and do not tell me anything further. Show me these documents, then only we can go ahead and file your suit. Okay, so this is how you have to be in a position to know as to what is required and what is not required. All right, so after you take the instructions and then you sit down to draft your case, you should know first where to file the suit. Okay, because we have studied CPC, and in CPC there are various sections, right from section 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, which tell you as to where the jurisdiction of the court is, where you have to file a suit. Say for example, it is a marriage petition. Okay, if it is a marriage petition, the act which will pick up, if your client asks you, if your client is the wife, and the first thing you need to know is how to determine as to which law is to be applied, because there are a plethora of personal laws in our country. We do not have the uniform civil code. So if we have to sit down and draft a marriage petition, then how do we draft it? The first question is which law to apply, whether CPC is applicable, which court to go and file, where to go and file, how to go and file, what to ask for, if there is a child involved, custody of the child, maintenance to the wife. All these things are going to be banging at the same time. So in case of a client coming up to your office and asking you to file a divorce petition for her, then the first thing you need to know is ask the lady as to whether she's a Hindu. Okay, now she may not know suppose, she is not educated. She's not an educated woman. She may not know what, being a Hindu is. So you should, in your local language, in your local phrases that you can apply, try to ask her how the marriage ceremony was conducted. Okay. So she will tell you that yes, there was fire and we went 7 times around the fire. So you have to arrive at a conclusion that okay, she's a Hindu. Okay. So now once you know that the marriage is a Hindu marriage, so the Hindu Marriage Act will apply. Now in this case, if the Hindu Marriage Act is to be applied, then you ought to know what is the jurisdiction of the court. Under the Hindu Marriage Act, the jurisdiction goes to the place where marriage took place. Second, where the husband and wife last resided together. And third, if the petitioner is the wife, where at present of the filing of the petition she is currently residing. So these are the various jurisdictions that you have to file your suit. You have to file your petition. So you sit down to draft your marriage petition. Now, the first thing that you have to determine is what is the ground for divorce. Okay, you are filing a marriage petition under the Hindu Marriage Act, Section 13, for dissolution of marriage by a decree of divorce. Now, in this instance, then you ought to know what are the statutory grounds of divorce. Cruelty. Cruelty is a ground. So then what is cruelty? Is cruelty always physical or is it even mental? Now, is irretrievable breakdown of marriage a ground for divorce? Can that be taken as a ground for divorce for a Hindu Marriage Act? No, because that is not a ground. Okay. So you ought to first read as to the provisions, the various statutes that are going to help you to draft your petition. So having determined the jurisdiction. Now, for example, you are in Pune. You are staying in the limits of Pune Municipal Corporation. Okay. And your client says that the marriage took place at a marriage hall in Nigdi, which comes under PCMC. She further tells you that they last resided together at Nigdi and currently she's residing in Pimpri. So obviously all these three places do not come within the territorial jurisdiction of the Pune Municipal Corporation. Now family courts are not established beyond a certain municipal corporation limits. The very provision of family courts, section 1 will tell you that a family court is to be established where the population is beyond a certain number. So we do not have family courts for PCMC area, we have family courts for only PMC area. So in this case, will your petition for divorce be filed in the family court? The answer is a no. And where it is to be filed, it is to be filed with the civil judge, senior division, Pune. Okay. So once you determine this jurisdiction, remember that as a lawyer, you ought to know something of everything. Okay. If you are still not aware of the aspect of jurisdiction, if you are a very novice lawyer, the best way is to go and approach a senior lawyer. Or the best way is to go and approach a superintendent of the court, the nazir of the court, the registrar of the court, and ask him for assistance. That, sir, this is the facts of the case. Where should I file the petition? He will guide you. Your senior will guide you. Remember, Google is not going to have answers to all your questions. All right. So even if you have smartphones worth rupees 1 lakh and you have Google in it, there is internet in it, it is not going to come to your rescue at all. Law books are indispensable. You cannot do away with law books. You have to do your part of the study. You have to know what are the provisions of CPC. You have to know what are the provisions of all these various laws which are going to help you draft and tell you where to file the cases. Because if you file it in a court, if you go and file it in the family court, the other side lawyer is going to come up and object to the jurisdiction. Okay. So remember that if there is an objection, then your entire case will fail. Your client is going to suffer. You will get your fees, but the ultimate sufferer is your client. And that client is going bad-mouthing. So to prevent all this, better know what these provisions are today itself. So the first thing you ought to know is what is the jurisdiction of the court. Go back to that enactment. Find out where is the jurisdiction. Okay. After that, once you sit down to draft, let it be a marriage petition or let it be a suit, are you going to sit and write that yes, my Client, are you going to use the word my client? No. When you sit down to draft, the first thing that you should, be aware is what is the format in which I have to draft this marriage petition. If it is a suit for specific performance, what is that format that I need to know that I have to draft? Where is this format? This format is not on Google. This format is in the barrack in CPC. If you have a barrack of CPC, kindly go through the schedules that are at the end of the barrack. You'll find the formats for all the kinds of suits, civil suits that are there in CPC. You will know as to how well drafted this piece of legislation is. Okay, even if you have to file an application for appointment of a court commissioner, amendment application, the format is there. Okay, so please take it's a skeleton format. They are only helping you with the skeleton format. It is for you to put the facts in appropriate places and file your claims. So now, for example, we are sitting down to draft a plaint for partition. Okay. Now, if you want to file a suit for partition, what is the presupposition? The presupposition is that the parties are Hindus. Okay. Because people of other faith do not have the concept of jointness of property with them, and that is why a Hindu joint family is only to be found, that joint family aspect is only to be found in Hindus. So obviously when you file a suit for partition, the law presupposes that it is to be under the Hindu law. So which law is to be applied? What is the aspect of jointness? What is the aspect of a coparcenary? You ought to know before you file a suit for partition. Okay. Now, when you sit down to file the suit, how do you write the title? Before the Honorable Civil Judge, Senior Division, Pune. Now, whether it has to be a senior division or whether it has to be a junior division. Now, that will entirely depend upon the pecuniary jurisdiction that has been assigned. So, if you want to file a suit, the valuation of which is beyond rupees 10 lakhs or more, the suit has to go to the senior division. If it is a suit, the pecuniary jurisdiction of which is below 10 lakhs, it has to go to the junior division. So, even these aspects you should know. And how do you know it? You are not expected, no one expects it from you that you know it on day one. No, you will gradually know all these things when you start your juniorships. If you're already doing your juniorships, kindly pay attention to all these things. If you're senior, if you're attached to the office of a senior, then kindly go and spend some time with the clerk of your senior. This clerk is also your teacher. This clerk is also going to show you, is also going to tell you, is also going to make you learn these various aspects of procedure, because your clerk knows the procedure very well. He is that one person who after your senior is going to be your best teacher for your life. He is going to tell you, okay, if you have to file a suit, then if you have to file it for the senior division, you have to go to this registrar. If you have to go and file an appeal, you have to go to this registrar. Okay. So how to file this compendium, what to do, he is the person who is going to tell you this entire procedure. Okay. Now, as far as drafting is concerned, it is your senior who is going to help you with this drafting. But remember one thing, he is only there to guide you. Entire efforts are to be taken by you and you only. No one other you can take these efforts. Okay, so if you have to file a civil suit, let us say like we said for partition. So if your senior tells you that yes, let us file a suit for partition, please start drafting, and you are aimless and clueless, start with a client counseling session. Start with writing down the facts of the case. Now, in a suit for partition, who are the parties? The parties are always people from the same family. Brothers pitched against sisters. Sisters pitched against brothers. Father against sons and daughters and wife. So on and so forth. So they are members of the same family, because partition implies that members of the same family are going to partition their properties. They are unhappy with the current state of affairs. That is why they are coming to you and asking you that we want to partition these properties. Otherwise, the other brother or the sister or the mother or the father are going to sell off the properties without giving their share. Okay. So you should then first inquire as to whether that property is also joint family property or not, or whether it is self acquired property. So in all these cases, remember that these minute things are going to help you a lot, because there is going to be an objection on these small little aspects tomorrow. CPC is replete with provisions as to how a defendant, when he appears in the matter, can object to limitation, can object to jurisdiction, so on and so forth. Okay, so kindly remember that when you are drafting a suit today, be aware of all the objections that the other party can take. And the best way to do is that put yourself in the shoes of that other party, and accordingly you can, draft your plaint so well that even if you are yourself the defendant in that matter, assume, then these objections you would have taken, and that is why your suit has to be foolproof. All right. So now when you're sitting down to draft a suit for partition, you should know first court fee stamp that is involved. Every civil suit, be aware, you have to know that you have to ask your client to deposit a certain amount as court fee. Now which law will you use for knowing what court fee stamp you have to pay? You will pick up the Maharashtra Court Fees Act. It was earlier the Bombay Court Fees Act. Now it is the Maharashtra Court Fees Act. So once you have picked up this Maharashtra Court Fees Act, you should know which section to look into. Section 6. Now what in Section 6 will provide you for your suit for partition? When you open Section 6, you will scroll down and see that yes, if you have to file a suit for partition, the court fee stamp is that kindly value the property only as to what your share is. Okay, so if the total property is a plot of land, the value of that total property is rupees 3 crores. All right, you are not expected to pay court fee stamp in a suit for partition on that 3 crores entirely. No, you have to pay court fee stamp only as to what your share is. So if your share is 1/3, so then 1/3 of 3 crores is how much? So pay the court fee stamp only on that amount. Okay. So once you pay the court fee stamp, once you inform your client, inform the client on day one that see, you want to file a suit for partition. This is the total valuation of the suit. This is the court fee that you have to pay. Can you pay this court fee? Then only we can go ahead with drafting this suit. The suit will have to be filed in Pune, because your joint family property in Pune. It is not going to help you if you are staying here and the defendants are staying here. It is not, because when you have to file a suit for property, the jurisdiction has to go to the place where the property is situated. All right. Yes, you can also file a suit where the defendant resides, but ideally the court should be Pune court, where the property is situated, because tomorrow when you have to be put into the possession of that property, if you have filed the suit at Nagar court because the defendant resides there, then the matter will be transferred from Nagar to Pune in execution proceedings, because the property is in Pune. To avoid that hassle at that time, better file the suit in Pune. So tell your client that the suit can be filed in Nagar, it can be filed in Pune. You decide where you want to file the suit. Tell them today itself. Okay, don't then keep them in the dark. All right. So now with these things at your assistance, you can then draft your suit. When you sit down to draft your suit, kindly remember certain basic points. If you have Mogha's Law and Pleadings in your library, kindly go, when your college reopens, kindly go to the library and please pull out this book on Mogha's Law of Pleadings. All right. Please see this book. Also, if in your library you have this book, which I have, since the day I am being practicing as a junior lawyer, kindly see this book, kindly buy this book. This is a book by Sarkar on Civil Court Practice and Procedure Manual. It is, the publisher is LexisNexis Buttersworth Wadhwa. I'm showing this book to you all. Kindly see it. And please go and read this book if it is there in your library. Even if it is not there in your library, this book comes only for 1,395 rupees. Please go and purchase this book if you intend to be a litigator. This book is going to help you a lot. All right. Okay. So with these things at your aid when you sit down to draft your plaint. The first thing you should know is what to write in the petition, what to write in the plaint. You have to write only facts and nothing but the facts. It is not going to help you if you write the plaintiff states that the defendant has committed cruelty upon the plaintiff. Full stop. Cruelty is defined in such and such judgment by the Supreme Court. Cruelty is a ground for divorce under Section 13(1)(1)(a) of the Hindu Marriage Act. Cruelty is also mental cruelty. No, you're not supposed to write all this at all. You're only supposed to bring out how cruelty was committed upon the person of the petitioner. If you're filing a suit for partition, you are not expected to write. The plaintiff submits that the suit is filed for partition under the section so and so of the Specific Relief Act. Property is movable or immovable. The Transfer of Property Act provides for property. You are not expected to write all this at all. No. All that you have to write is who is the plaintiff, who is the defendant, how are they related, what is the suit property. All right. Then what is expected further? You bring out as to how, why you've come to the court. Why have you come to the court? There is jointness. They are all co-partners. Once you've established the relationship between you and the defendants, the plaintiff and the defendants, that they are biological brothers and sisters of each other. Okay. That they are related to each other. That there is a suit property. Now you have to describe the suit property. Okay, so you should always describe the suit property at the foot of the plaint by writing a schedule. All that piece and parcel of land bearing survey number 23/A and measuring 4,500 square feet and within the territorial jurisdiction of this honorable court and also within the limits of the Pune Municipal Corporation and within the limits of the office of the Sub Registrar of Assurances, Haveli number 10, Pune, and bounded as follows: on or towards the east, on or towards the south, on or towards the west, on or towards the north. This is how you're supposed to identify the property. This is how you have to write the actual description of the property. Now you may ask why. Why is it that you have to describe the property like this in so much of detail in the plaint? Because the answer is not that only because in the sale deed, in the agreement to sale, or in the gift deed, in the release deed, it is so defined we should write it down in the plaint. The answer is a big no. The only reason why I have to describe the property to such greater details, such in-depth details, is that if tomorrow an execution proceeding is to be filed in the court and this property has to be attached, this property has to be auctioned, this property has to be sold off. Who is going to do this? Is the judge going to come up from the court and go to the property, find a property? No. It is the superintendent of the court. It is the person from the court, the officer of the court, who is going to come to this property and auction this property, attach this property, and that is why it should be easier for him to identify the property. If the property is, a vacant plot of land, how is he going to find out this property as to which property I have to attach? Okay. So to make things easier for him in execution proceedings, even for the court to, understand what is this property, because the court is not going to go every time and see the property. It is not expected that the court has a field visit. The judge goes for a field visit. No, there is no such concept. Then to aid the judge, to aid the court, to aid the other side, to aid this execution proceedings, this officer of the court in execution proceedings, you have to write such a description of the property. All right. After you do this, when you start, then you come back. What do you write? The property has been described in Schedule A, written at the foot of the plaint. Full stop. The plaintiff further states that the property is joint family property of the plaintiff and the defendants. Full stop. It is not only your joint family property, it is joint family property of the defendants also. All right. Then what do you write? That the defendant number 2, being the father, is trying to dispose of the property by entering into an agreement to sell with Mr. XYZ. Now this XYZ also has to be added as a party in a suit for partition. All right. Because you are going to seek a relief against him. So even he has to be there along with your brothers and sisters and family members. All right, he is a proper and necessary party. So you have to then write the suit ahead. Try to find out what is the cause of action. Cause of action is what? A bundle of facts which need to be traversed by the other side in order to bring a relief to the court of law. Then try to write the jurisdiction. There are certain things, which are mandatorily to be written. What are they? After you finish writing the facts of the case, that I asked for partition, it was refused. That is why I've come to the court and I'm seeking my share, 1/3 share in the property of this family. Okay, because I am an integral part of this family. I am a co-parcener. I'm entitled to 1/3 share. Because it was denied to me, I've come to the court of law. It is therefore prayed that the plaintiff may kindly be declared that the plaintiff is entitled to 1/3 share of his property. Two, it may further be declared that the property is joint family property. The plaintiff further states that the plaintiff may kindly be put in peaceful possession of his 1/3 share. Okay, so this is how you have to frame your reliefs. This is how you have to draft your reliefs, because ultimately, when you say a suit is decreed, your suit is allowed, the court is going to write that decree, give the judgment in terms of what the reliefs are. So when you're writing your facts, see to it that they are in consonant, with the reliefs that you are asking. You cannot write the facts and then say that, and then you forget to write that you need to be put in possession of the property also. If you're filing a suit for partition, merely the court declaring your share is not going to suffice the purpose. It also needs to be declared that you are put into actual and peaceful possession of that 1/3 share. And if you forget to write this, the court is not going to tell you that you forgot to write for possession. The court is not going to tell you at all. The defendant at the most will take a defense in his written statement. Now, if you do not amend your plaint at that point of time and include possession, it is the loss of your claim. Because if you tell your client that no, we will see what is to be done later on. After the suit is decreed, we'll file a suit for possession. By that time, limitation would have already gone. So when you are seeking a declaration in the court of law, you also have to write a consequent relief that you be put into possession of that share of property also, because both these things go hand in hand. All right. So if you forget to write this aspect of putting it into possession, it is going to be fatal to the suit. All right. You also need to see if that claim itself is within limitation. You ought to see whether you've paid court fee stamp. All right. If you are in the state of Maharashtra, kindly note that if a woman wants to file a suit for claiming share in her matrimonial property, she is exempted from paying court fee stamp. You should be aware of this also. All right. So kindly note these small points. They are very relevant for you all. All right. Then the next thing you should know about pleading is that your pleading should be concise. Your pleading should come in a chronological format. All right. And once you do this, once you get into the habit of drafting, you will see how, easy drafting would be. All right. Remember that, you shouldn't always take help of someone else's draft. Try to bring your own, way of drafting pleadings. All right. What is pleadings? Because pleading is ultimately your plain and your written statement. All right. Now, if you're a defendant and you're sitting down to draft your written statement, are you going to write, say, for in this suit for partition, this defendant appears in the matter and he writes, paragraph 1 of the plaint is denied, paragraph number 2 of the plaint is denied, paragraph number 3 of the plaint is denied. Is this going to suffice your purpose? It is not going to suffice your purpose at all. Because remember, evasive denials is not acceptable in the Code of Civil Procedure at all. There cannot be evasive denials. You have to explain as to why you're denying it. The defendant states that contents of paragraph number 1 of the plaint are not true and correct. Right there itself, why they are not true and correct. The defendant states that the property which is described in schedule number B is not joint family property of the plaintiffs and the defendants. It is the self-acquired property of the defendant number 2, the father. Full stop. Then explain how it is the self-acquired property. All right. Just don't merely stop there and write that it is only self-acquired property. Explain. All right. So drafting a plaint is a skill. Drafting a written statement is also a very, very important skill, because your defendant, your client needs to, you need to protect his rights and interests there and there. You cannot say, let the matter go in appeal, then I'll add this point. There is no second time, whatever has to go in your pleadings today, it has to go today itself. Though appeal is also said to be continuation of a suit, nonetheless, there are limitations to it. Because once a matter goes in appeal, after a judgment and decree is passed, then beyond order 41 rule 27 of CPC, you will not be able to amend your plaint or your written statement. All right. If you are referring to a document, you have to ask your client that please bring a Xerox. Show me. But also, you have to ask your client, where is the original? Show me the original. You are not expected to file that original document today. If your client wants you to file a suit for declaring that the will that has been left behind by your deceased father is illegal, void, ab initio, it is not, it's a forged document. Then you have to ask your client, where is the will? And your client tells you that I only have the Xerox copy. I do not have the original. It is with the defendant. It is with the brother. Then you can still file the suit. But when you're drafting that suit, you have to mention in the suit. The plaintiff states that the plaintiff came to know about the existence of the will when the defendant number 2 brother showed the original copy, which is in his safe custody, to the plaintiff sister. Okay. So there and there you are making it amply clear that the original copy of that will is with the defendant. So when the suit starts, when the matter proceeds, you have to file an application and tell the court that I am the plaintiff. I am challenging the will. It is expected that I file the original copy of the will, but your lords, this will is not a registered document. Will is not compulsory required to be registered. It is not a compulsorily registrable document. That is why I could not go to the office of the registrar and bring a certified. All that I have is a photocopy. I know that a photocopy document will not be exhibited and not be added in evidence. But I'm filing this application that the defendant number 2 brother should be directed that the original copy of the will, which is in his custody, should be filed in the court. All right. So if this defendant number 2, with whom the copy of that will is, has appeared in the matter, has filed his written statement, and has not denied the custody of the will in his written statement, then, and if later on he does not produce this copy of the will, the court is going to draw an adverse inference against him. All right. So this is how civil suits proceed in the court of law. You cannot constantly go on amending your pleadings, your plaints and your written statements as and forth you start getting the idea of drafting. When you sit down to draft a suit, when you sit down to draft a written statement, you have to be well aware of what is pleading, what are the rules of pleading, what should be, drafted and what should not be drafted today only, because there is no tomorrow. Okay. You should always be also further aware that you cannot sit down and write the nature of a document in your plaint. The plaintiff states that there is an agreement to sell. The plaintiff further states that the agreement is printed on a 500 rupee stamp paper. The plaintiff further states that there are signatures of the defendant number 2 and his 2 witnesses on the agreement to sell. It is not expected you write this because this is a part of evidence. This is expected to be written in the evidence affidavit and not in the plaint. The agreement to sell is very much there on record. You are going to file it along with the plaint. Even if it is a photocopy, it is there. The court is going to read it. Okay, so all these things are not expected to be written in your plaint. Mention that there is an agreement to sell executed between, or a sale deed executed, or a release deed executed between the plaintiff and the defendants. All right. Now, however, if there are certain instances like you have to allege fraud, you have to allege undue influence, you have to allege misrepresentation, then in those instances you have to write that if the plaintiff is a sister and the brother has taken her to the office of the registrar and has made her sign the release deed, you have to write in the plaint, because CPC provides that certain details have to be given in the plaint itself when you are alleging fraud or misrepresentation. Okay, so you have to write, the plaintiff submits that the defendant brother took her to the office of the sub registrar and asked her to put her thumb impression on a document. The plaintiff cannot read and write. That is why she was not aware as to on what document her thumb impression was taken. Okay, now see how objections would come if you are mentioning this in the plaint, okay, which you also have to mention. The defendant will come up and say, the suit is filed in English, sir. The plaintiff has put her thumb impression, no doubt. Then how is it that the plaintiff knows what is written in the plaint? All right, because if your client cannot read and write, if your client does not know how to read English also, or if, even for that matter Marathi, then what are you going to, how is it going to help you when you finish drafting the plaint? At the foot of the plaint, right, the lawyer who has drafted this plaint, the lawyer who has drafted this written statement has explained this entire plaint slash this written statement to the client, that is the plaintiff or the defendant, whatever it is, in his vernacular language. And the client has understood the contents of this plaint or the written statement. And then only he has signed it. Put your signature, put the thumb impression of your client. All right. And then bring a witness and write there that this person has put his thumb impression in my presence. Okay, so kindly note all these things, kindly remember these things. Okay, after this, when you are sitting and proving a certain document in evidence, remember that that document has to be filed in photocopy. It has to be, sufficiently filed when you are filing the plaint itself. You cannot file new documents when the matter is posted for evidence. You cannot suddenly one day come and file a document which was never even mentioned in the plaint, which was not mentioned in the list of documents filed along with the plaint. All right, because the other side is going to come and object and say, sir, this amounts to evidence beyond pleadings. Whatever is written in the plaint is only going to come to your rescue. So on day one, when you are drafting your plaint, when you are drafting your written statement, be aware of all these small things that are going to come and help you tomorrow also. Prepare your plaint and your written statement today as if you are going to finally argue the matter tomorrow. When you are starting your final arguments, you have to read your plaint, you have to read the answers to the plaint given in the written statement. It could be a written statement, it could be a set off, it could be a counterclaim. Okay, all these three things the defendant is entitled to do. So if in order 8, so if there is a counterclaim, you should know how to refer to that counterclaim when you're finally arguing the matter. Because when a defendant comes up and files his counterclaim under order 868, rules 6826G, then you have to know today itself that I have to answer that counterclaim. And what is that answer to that counterclaim? That answer to the counterclaim is filing a written statement to that counterclaim. So if you see, actually, written statement is not only filed by a defendant, written statement is also filed by a plaintiff in answer to a counterclaim. So all these small things are going to come and rescue you when you start your journey as a litigator. When you are in the appellate courts, you cannot reopen the entire case as it is unless and until it is the first appellate court. When you are before the second appellate court, only points of law are going to be, argued. And when you are before the Supreme Court, again remember, you have to present a summary version of why you are before the Supreme Court of India. Every stage has its own drafts, it has its own formats, it has its own procedure. When you are before the High Court or when you are before the Supreme Court, you have to refer to the civil manual. You have to refer to the rules of the Supreme Court on the original side, rules of the High Court on the original and the appellate side. All these books have to be read. All these points have to be noted. Whether court fee stamp is to be paid if you're the plaintiff who is not happy with the decree that is passed in the trial court. If it is a suit for recovery and you're the defendant and the suit has been decreed and you're challenging that decree in the first appellate court, then whether you have to pay a certain amount in as a decretal amount in the appellate court, then only your appeal will be numbered. What is a certified copy? How to apply it? Happens to the period of limitation? How it is exempted when you apply for certified copies? The time that is required for a certified copy to be tendered to you, whether it is, to be exempted from calculating limitation, where the appeal is to be filed, whether all orders are appealable, whether all decrees can be challenged in the courts of law. The answers to all these questions are in the enactment itself, are in CPC itself. It is for you to find out. All right. Remember, CPC is an answer to all your questions. CPC, if read cohesively and not in isolation with each other, will answer all your questions as to all drafts, all procedures, etc. CPC is a wonderful subject when it comes to actually being a civil litigator and arguing matters in the courts. It is no doubt a matter of time, a matter of patience, but yes, it is a wonderful journey. All right. There is, a lot that I can talk to you all about regarding civil drafting and procedures, but our 1 hour period is over here, and your span of attention will also, not allow you to concentrate more on this lovely subject. So I would actually request, sir, that if another round is, another session is preserved next week, that will help me to cover a few more aspects that I intend to cover, which will help children also in their further life and career as litigators. Sir, are you online with us?
Sir, yes म्हणतायत sir. Sir says yes.
Yes. So next time, next Sunday, again, can we have a lecture? Children, are you all okay with it? Even if the college,
Yes,
college should also. Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am,
So,
ma'am, it was
children, I
so.
hope this. Yes.
Ma'am, it was a
Yes.
wonderful and informative session, and given us very much practical approach. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes.
And please
Anytime.
continue
Next.
it in the next 2 or 3 lectures. We want it
Yes,
more.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I'm telling you,
Thank you,
there is
ma'am.
a lot more, Yes, criminal aspects. A few students are asking. After we finish the civil aspects, we can definitely have a section on criminal aspects also, especially 138 matters. Even those are matters which you, as junior lawyers, new lawyers, should handle, because they may not give you a lot of money, but then a small amount of money to start with is really okay, and 138 matters are very nice to handle. All right.
Yes, ma'am.
So
Now
yes.
I think I
Yes,
am
sir.
audible.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
Next Sunday. Yeah.
Hello, madam. One request.
Yes.
In next lecture, please provide some format of draft.
Sure. I'll if you have a WhatsApp group of all
More
students,
information.
yes, I will send it on your WhatsApp group also. That can be done. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, madam.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes. Now, so if you have any queries, you can ask. But request is confine your queries to the topic only. Don't ask the general questions which are not relevant to this topic. Students. If you have any queries, you can ask now. I think they don't have.
Yes, because everyone is awaiting for the next lecture also.
Yes.
Yes, Pandra sir, I would definitely request you to allow me a few more sessions, because
Yes,
the
ma'am,
topic
sure.
is so vast that
Yeah. It is not
even
possible
I am
to
not,
cover all the aspects.
yes.
Still, you tried a lot to cover many
Yes.
things.
Yes, there are many things, and I'm looking forward to join you all next week also.
Yes,
So
yes.
on this note, we part ways today. So thank you
Okay.
so much for patiently listening and giving me this opportunity. Meet you all on next Sunday.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
On
so
behalf
much.
of college and management, I am very
Yes,
thankful to you for giving your valuable time. And I request
anytime,
you
sir.
to, whenever we called, you should make yourself available for.
Anytime, sir. That goes without saying. Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.